For over 35 years, Todd Garner has overseen blockbuster films like Con Air, Anger Management, Triple X, 13 Going on 30, and the Mortal Kombat franchise.
Why are they letting you make these movies?
Join Todd as he shares tips and stories from the front lines of producing in Hollywood.
I'm Adam Sandler.
I'm Rebel Wilson.
This is Jeff Probst.
I'm Kaylee Cuoco.
I'm Eli Roth.
This is Marlon Wayans.
Hey, it's Ed Helms.
This is Shay Mitchell.
Hey everybody, this is Kevin James, and this is The Producer's Guide.
The Producer's Guide.
The Producer's Guide.
The Producer's Guide with Todd Garner.
Todd Garner.
Todd Garner.
Todd Garner.
What a combination.
Welcome to the Producer's Guide podcast. I'm Todd Garner. In today's episode, we celebrate a completely new distribution model that is taking the world of entertainment by storm, quite literally. The Sphere is a massive high-tech entertainment arena in Las Vegas, Nevada, known for its immersive audio and 16K wraparound LED screen that covers both the interior and exterior. The Sphere cost $2.3 billion to build, making it the most expensive entertainment venue in Las Vegas. Opened in September 2023, the Sphere hosts concerts, residencies like U2 and the Eagles, DJs, as well as films designed specifically for the venue. Most notably, the reimagined Wizard of Oz, which just surpassed 2 million tickets sold, generating over $260 million in sales. Joining me today is Carolyn Blackwood, head of Sphere Studios. With over 25 years in the media and entertainment industry, Carolyn leads the charge at Sphere, overseeing immersive content creation that pushes the boundaries of both technology and creativity. Her impressive background includes pivotal roles in media and entertainment, most recently as Chief Operating Officer at Warner Bros. Pictures Group, where she worked on blockbuster films like Lord of the Rings, It, and the Conjuring franchises. Today, we discuss the groundbreaking work happening at Sphere Studios and Carolyn's vision for the future of entertainment. Enjoy. All right, I'm here with Carolyn Blackwood. Hello, Carolyn.
Hello, Todd.
Fantastic. Well, you have a very exciting, cool, newish gig. Working at this incredible new distribution model called the Sphere. Walk me through your background getting to the Sphere. Walk me through all the way through New Line and getting to the Sphere.
You mean how we know each other?
How do we know? How have we done so many movies and had so many interesting meals together?
I know, it's true. I've been in the business for about 30 years. I know. When I was 10, right? When I started when I was 10. I started actually in independent film and worked for a guy named Mark Damon. He, was well known in the indie film world and was one of the sort of first people who kind of put together that concept of foreign pre-sales in order to finance film. And so I started working for him out of law school, actually. I worked for him for a few years, and then I took this job at New Line. It was, a fantastic ride in the New Line era for me. Loved everything about it. Loved all the incredibly talented people that I met and got to work with, including you. And ended up in about 2008, New Line became part of Warner Bros. And there was a really sort of sad era for us because we were, very much a standalone independent film studio. We had our own domestic distribution. We did the foreign presale model on international. But when there was a change of leadership at Time Warner, the decision was made to kind of consolidate the two labels, essentially. And so New Line became a label under Warner Brothers. And we lost a lot of really, really great colleagues in that transition period. And we kind of became this mighty group of about 40 to 50 people that even got a little further culled. I think there was a point in time where it was about 35 of us. And we were scrappy. We were determined, even inside this new world order. And we did a lot of great things, and we went a really great run with a lot of fantastic films, including some that you worked on with us. Then we, kind of continued to evolve, and more consolidation happened, and the AT&T era, and then more consolidation happened, and then we found ourselves on the other side of a Warner Brothers Discovery transaction, at which point there was a lot of upheaval. I exited in September of 2022 after kind of getting through a lot of the pandemic infused crazy. Took a little bit of time at that point and was looking around and kind of figuring out where the industry was going, and got the call about this job, about this role in Sphere. And I thought, well, that's different. That's interesting. And has a lot of the things that I've always loved about the business, but a lot of new things too. So I kind of tackled this about 18 months ago and haven't looked back.
So when you were first making the transition from law to go work at New Line, why? Why the entertainment business? What was it that was in your past that made you decide that you wanted to be in the entertainment business?
It's interesting because you live in Los Angeles, and when you live in Los Angeles, so many people are involved in the entertainment business in one way or another, right? So just the people you come in contact with. So it's a horribly cliche answer, but the truth is that was the lifeblood of this town. And so you want to be a part of it. So I found myself really drawn to that. And, I had been working, I always worked through college as well as a bartender, right? So I think and I've had this conversation. So I worked bartending in my younger years. I worked bartending through law school. I worked bartending after I got out of law school. When I started at New Line, I still had a, standing Saturday night gig at Baja Cantina. So I like people. And I like talking with people. And I like, the idea that this communal kind of, community of people that you can chat with and get to know and figure out what makes people, get excited. And it wasn't so much of a leap for me from my past to sort of suddenly find myself in film. So it was a natural trajectory for me, I think.
What was your original job title when you started at New Line, and what was the job? What was the expectation?
So when I first started at New Line, I came into the legal and business affairs department and very quickly realized, oh, wait a second, they actually think I'm a lawyer. Like should have been obvious by the title. But so I decided, okay, I'm going to do that job. I'll do that role. I'll draft contracts. I will, perform that function. But I looked around to say, well, what else is available? What else is there? What else, what other needs need to be served? And very quickly started doing a lot of work in the, finished film acquisition area.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started doing, going to Sundance and doing all the festival circuit and working with Fine Line and Mark Ardesky and that whole crew. And we had a good time and then started working on the quintessential negative pickup, right? So where we, work with a lot of talented producers who would put together a package and we would be there to say, okay, let's figure out how we're going to help you finance that. And we're going to, we're going to do the domestic distribution on that. And so I started doing a lot of work around the finance area of it as well. And so my job titles kept getting made up. So every year I'd get a new title and I was reporting to someone new in the organization, right? Whether it was the CFO or the COO or, then the head of production. And so I kept kind of navigating my way through the system based on what the company needed and expanding out that sort of, portfolio of things that I got to play around in. And it was it was a really fun era, a really fun time, incredibly talented people that I was, privileged to work with. And by the time I exited Warner Bros., I was the COO of the film studio.
And before you became COO of Warner Brothers Group, what were your primary duties at New Line before you transitioned over? What was your overall responsibilities and kind of where did you fit into that whole matrix?
I was very much the day-to-day operator of the place. So the production teams, physical production, post-production, business and legal affairs, communications, all of those teams sort of reported up to me. And, Richard Brenner as the head creative guru and I were partners. And so we kind of conspired together and we worked together and helped put together the slate. And we would advocate for things, Toby had green light and we would, kind of partner up and figure out what we were going to make. And I would help, the P&L process, filling in that long range plan and helping the team support the teams with what they needed to execute on the things that we were going to make. I worked really closely with marketing and distribution and, dating of our movies and the marketing of our movies. And so we were a team. We were all one big team that sort of all were, rowing the boat in the same direction, no matter how choppy those waters got. And they got pretty choppy.
And you mentioned that you were scrappy before and that the transitions and the consolidation really played a big part of kind of the formation of New Line and kind of how it's evolved. One of the things you're known for, and I think potentially could be proud of, is that during your tenure at New Line, you guys did it for less and you did it better.
Yeah.
So, and that's something that you would talk to me about quite a bit. And also, it seems like to some people like magic because seems like you're just saying a cost. When you really became that partner to Richard Brenner and you were really looking at the landscape and your North Star, for better or worse, is less money, better. What kind of went through the process of you determining the costs of your movies?
So it depended, right? Todd, you and I've had this conversation multiple times. Like every time you get a green light on any movie, it's like a little mini miracle. And there's a bunch of things that go into it. It's a combination of what the landscape looks like at the time, the things that have, happened in the 24 months preceding, the things you're seeing on the roadmap 24 months in front of you. And it's a balance of all of those things. And everyone would talk about comps, right? You're looking at comps that happened before. But we always, a lot of times we would defy the comps. So we would have to look at things and say, okay, we're going to use them as a tool. And the P&Ls were always, something that were a lot of emphasis would get put on those P&Ls. But then we would have to work together and collaboratively and creatively to figure out, okay, how do we actually approach this? The data is one input. So we would use it, but then we would talk to ourselves about why it applied and why it didn't apply, why this was going to be different. And so that was the big sort of initial push that we would have to try to, almost reverse engineer what it felt like we could actually responsibly make this movie for. That was a very big input for us. But at the same time, we would take these scripts and say, okay, like, this. It's like somebody hands you a 160-page script, you immediately know, right, that that's going to be a very long movie and it's probably going to be a very expensive movie because there's that's a lot of material to try to cover. So we used to talk a lot about, okay, can we try to edit with the pencil first? Can we try to do that? So those were some of the things that would go into the analysis of like, let's make sure we're doing something that is creatively has the integrity that we're trying to achieve, but we're not being lazy about it in the sense of like, okay, we'll just shoot a whole bunch of stuff and we'll figure it out in post. And that was things I think that we at New Line did very well together with a lot of our producers, you included, about understanding the value of that, of being kind of rigorous and a little disciplined about it up front so that we could turn around and get the most bang for our buck.
And since you're a small company, were you relying on margins more or library value or marketability? What, if you could just assign sort of a percentage into how those greenlight committees operated and spoke, because obviously you have your comps, everybody's hedging their bets a little bit on their comps, to quote Trading Places, everybody wants the G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip at Christmas, so they want to make sure they hit their numbers. Everybody's hedging. You sometimes defy the comps. You kind of have a gut of where the comps are at. Like when I was at Disney, Michael Eisner, because we were in such a state of growing, Michael Eisner wanted 20% year over year growth every year, which is very hard to do in the movie business because it's hard to just grow original.
Not only hard to do, almost impossible to do.
Yeah, well, we ended up creating Hollywood Pictures. We bought ABC. I mean, he just kept buying things. So obviously that wasn't in your guys' decision making because you were consolidating. So was it margins, library value, marketability? What were the percentages as you go through that process?
We had a strike zone on the New Line side in particular. We had kind of had a strike zone. We had the creative talent that we had inside the organization, as well as the partners that we had outside the organization, had strike zones. Like horror was a strike zone for New Line. And so for us, the comps we would use were always our own.
Right.
And when you have that, that's actually a gift. There's an ability when you have that kind of history and that kind of comfort and pedigree you can kind of push those boundaries a little bit more. And also at the same time, know that you're likely to overperform whatever the metric would be. So the genre and the focus was a real gift that New Line had. And that was probably one of the singular most things that we would talk about in terms of our long-term plan, our slate. What we were trying to put together is strike zones, staying in an area that we knew we could execute at a certain level, right? And that was a big focus for us as we would sort of, kind of craft the slate. Then every once in a while you want to take a big swing, and every once in a while you want to do something that is maybe outside your comfort zone and see if you can make it happen. And there was a stuff in New Line's library and pedigree too, like when we, did Lord of the Rings. That was not truly part of the normal thing that New Line, was known for back in the day when those films were greenlit. And the same thing when it came around and we did Hobbit. The Hobbit films were also something that were outside of our kind of like, we're going to do these horror films, we're going to do comedies. These are the things that we were really, really great at. But that was part of our history and our pedigree. The composition of the slate and how we looked at it had a lot to do with what we thought we were really experts in executing on. So when you talk about marketability, that goes into that marketability analysis, right? And when you talk about margins, every studio had kind of a P&L base case that they would look for. If something looked on the base case like you were going to have less than a 10% or a 12% margin, you had to really want to think that you were going to defy the odds on that. Didn't mean you wouldn't like something that wasn't showing a nice or a healthy return in the base case. It just means you had to really, really, really feel for whatever reason that it was going to defy the odds.
Right. And because you had your own internal production department, post-production department, you guys controlled pretty much every aspect of the making of the movie, which would go into the budget.
Yep.
What was sort of your vibe in terms of New Line? How much less expensive did you expect New Line movie? Like if I walked into Studio B and said, it's a $50 million budget, what would be your assumption for New Line, given that you were scrappy and smaller and you had Brenner and Noose and these guys that were really, really super talented?
Yeah.
What was your expectation? Where would you try to bring it down to where you felt comfortable in the quote unquote New Line way?
If one of the bigger boys, to use, that sort of expression, was saying it could be done for 50, we could probably get it done for 42. I mean, if we were going to play Name That Tune, like we could always manage to shave, because look, everything from even the length of post-production.
Yeah, I was going to give me the why. Why can you do it for $8 million less?
In the world and in the industry, if you have a reputation, like right now, like Netflix is flush with cash, right? No one's thinking that they're going to get a discount when you work with Netflix. Back in the day, maybe, whatever. But now, where we are today, right? Everyone's like, Netflix, they pay a lot of money. They do these cost plus deals. They, it's like 100%, buyout. That's just what they're known for. Big studios, were always known for, especially in this era, being much more, kind of luxurious with their schedules. So if you have a post that's going to be 52-week post versus a 36-week post, guess what? The 36-week post is going to save you a whole bunch of money. And we were very efficient that way because we always approached things that way. Like when you start out scrappy and you feel like you're kind of singing for your supper, you have to differentiate yourself and you have to make it so that there's a really good reason when you're part of this larger organization. There was a really good reason for us to sort of justify why there needed to be this separate entity inside the larger studio system. What could we do that somebody else couldn't do? And that's how you have to be able to justify that. And so for us, it was, we're going to be super disciplined. We're going to be scrappy. We're going to, people knew that. People knew that about us. And when we would make deals, there was also this function of like, I was much happier to give away more back end if I could get something for cheaper up front, because then everybody wins in success. But I'm able to get that movie at a lesser price and greenlight it at a number that's not going to make people sort of be like, no, we're just not going to do that movie.
Right. And so given that you set the bar on your comps and that you guys had a really efficient strike zone with horror and comedies specifically. Were you fans of the Slate deal? Were you fans of the partnerships? Or did you feel like you were giving away too much upside, given that you were already protecting the downside so stringently?
I loved the idea of financial partners, but in a bespoke way.
Mm-hmm.
The overall Slate deal, I think, makes a lot of sense for larger studios. I didn't think overall Slate deals made sense for New Line.
Mm-hmm.
If you're making horror movies for $15 million or $19 million, I don't think you need to throw that into the kitty as part of a Slate deal. Because, then you are kind of giving away a lot of that upside and that ROI that you're likely to see anyway, especially because, like I said, you had that strike zone. But I think bigger, larger studios who are taking big, huge swings on things at much, much, much higher price points, I understood why Slate deals made sense for them.
Got it. And one of the things that used to be a pain in the ass when you would budget my movies, but I completely appreciate it in hindsight, especially having made 5 with you guys-ish, I think 5, is that you always baked in reshoots into the budget, which I always thought that was really annoying and unfair, but we always used them.
You always used them, Todd.
I think protecting that downside and just having a knowledge of how, especially in comedy and horror, where you're so attuned to the audience and they'll tell you exactly what they're needing, that those reshoots really obviously were hugely beneficial and do cost money. So it was good that you already had those baked in, but it's hard when you're trying to get a green light and that
I know. Listen, I know, dude.
Chunk is sitting there for the taking.
But at the end of the day, right, we called it additional photography, for the record, not reshoots.
Yep.
Because reshoots implied you did something wrong.
Exactly.
And additional photography was you're augmenting, something
it's
that's
going
already
so great. Let's make it better. Exactly.
It's going so great. Let's make it even better. But that was important because we did that very specifically. And you're right. I know it was frustrating, but you want to give yourself every possible shot to make the movie successful. And if you don't have that in, and then you're in the post process and you see a hole or you see a gap, and or the audience is telling you in the test process, right, that gap exists. And then you're having to try to convince a whole bunch of people to invest more money in something. And then it becomes a much harder thing to do.
Yeah.
As opposed to being the masters of our own destiny on it, trusting in our director, our producers, and our creative team to be able to use that wisely and not have to go and figure out, oh, wait, how are we going to convince all these people up a food chain that we're going to invest more than what the books say about this?
And it seems disingenuous because you're having to go back to them.
I never wanted you guys to be in that position, right? I never wanted you to be in that position. I thought one of my, back to what I thought my role was or my job, I always thought one of my responsibilities was to block and tackle as much as possible for the teams to do the work that they were also talented and capable of doing.
Yeah. All right. So I don't want you to think too much about this. Don't give it too much analysis. Just gut. What was the most profitable movie you ever worked on?
Oh, okay. Probably single movie? Single movie?
Yeah. Lord of the Rings obviously threw off lots of billions.
Yeah, Lord of the Rings and Hobbit, whatever. But probably it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Made a lot of money.
Yeah.
And
it made a lot of money.
And not on a gigantic budget. And
no,
it's now
on a $35 million budget.
Incredible. All right, let's now switch gears over to your current position, which is at the Sphere, and you are the head of the Sphere's operations and creative endeavors.
Yep.
Studio, yeah, the Sphere Studios. So I've also been to Burbank, walked around with you and saw how this sausage is made. And it's such an incredible experience when you're in there. You can't really describe it unless you experience it. So I know people have tried, but you really do have to go. Walk me through the idea. How does this even come about as an idea to create this thing, and why Vegas? And why now?
So it all starts with Jim Dolan, our chairman. He is, got a long legacy in different businesses and entertainment and sports. Father, founder of Cablevision and HBO. So Jim, had come up in a world and in a business where sports and entertainment were part of his DNA. And I think one of the things he identified several years ago was, what does it mean to sort of have a real communal entertainment experience? Obviously, Madison Square Garden, Radio City Music Hall, the Beacon, those are all things that MSG, the company that he is chairman of and has been leading for so long, those are venues, right? Those are venues in which people, sports events, musical acts, all of these things, entertainment. But what would it be to actually level that up in a way in which people aren't just there watching something or, being passive spectators of a sport, but you're in it? What would it be to be in it? So he came up with this idea of a spherical, immersive environment in which you could experience both musical acts as well as filmed entertainment and feel instead that you were in it. People use a lot of, this is, been going on now for a while. He didn't create the idea of, or the words immersive or experiential, but those are often buzzwords for people. And for Jim, they're really a religion.
Mhm.
And he did feel like doing something like that would be a whole new level of what it would be like to truly entertain people and make them feel like they're part of something, not just passive. So the idea of Sphere came about through Jim. And a lot of people told me he couldn't do it. A lot of people told him it wouldn't work. And he, nothing better than proving people wrong, right? Because the thing is a massive, massive success. It took a long time to build. It took more money than he had been originally planning. COVID got in the way, as it did with a lot of people on a lot of things. It is a true marvel. And like you said, you can't really explain it. You can see stuff on Instagram and you can think you understand it, but until you're in it, you really, really don't get it.
Yeah, and I could see where that idea would come from, given his background being inside of MSG and live events, just being completely immersed in with the Jumbotron above you and the crowd all around you and all the immersive LED screens and things they have now. I could see where that idea would naturally evolve. Why Las Vegas?
It's an entertainment mecca. There's a lot of, showmanship in Las Vegas. The land is there. I know that there were other sites, I think, that were considered at one point or another, but I think a lot of things kind of came together in a way that made a lot of sense. And, the community in Las Vegas and the way that they do embrace all different kinds of live entertainment, I think made it, kind of check, check, check.
Right.
And, it was, it's changed the landscape there, like everybody, the exosphere, which is what the outside of the building is called. Even one of the great things too that, I learned right when I was coming on board here, that I loved about this is one of the Jim's other mandates about this, was that outside that exosphere isn't just one big billboard, right? 50% of the time it has to be art, right? So artists we work with who create these unbelievable artistic marvels that go on the outside of that canvas. And that is 50% of what happens there, on top of other things that are sort of branded sponsorships and that kind of thing. But it's not just a billboard, it's a living piece of art.
Right. And you told me at one point when I was visiting you in Burbank that you want to ramp up towards a 24-hour experience, which would also help because you're in Vegas, which is a 24-hour town. So if that is part of the, the reason for doing it, then it would be a great place to do it. And the next place you're doing it is in Maryland. Why Maryland?
So, we've got our 18th, so Sphere is 18,000 seats, right, roughly. And we're doing the second Sphere we announced is in Abu Dhabi, and that is also going to be an 18,000 seat venue. The Maryland Sphere will be smaller. It's what we call an S6, about 6,000 seats.
Okay.
And there was a lot of things. We're talking, expansion's on our mind, right? So we talk a lot about expansion. We talk about a lot of things domestically and internationally. And one of the things that, sort of I think made a lot of sense with Maryland is that community they're very excited about the prospect of it. They've been great people to work with about it. And there's a lot of other things that are going on, in and around that community, other entertainment style things, a casino, hotels, different things that are going to make that, very vibrant in that jurisdiction. So it's just, it happens to be the first one in the States, that we've announced as part of our expansion plan. But we
Right.
talked to a lot of people. There's a lot of interest around the country.
And it makes sense because it would feel like you could share assets then. Wizard of Oz feels like it would play really well in Maryland also, and you could use the Aronofsky movie. But in Abu Dhabi, that feels like a much more of a disconnect, like you're going to be doing much more local programming and much more local bands, or how is that all going to work? Okay.
Yeah, we'll do both. I mean, there's definitely going to be a transfer of content. Stuff that we do here, transferable there. It would be part of the library of things that are available to Abu Dhabi. But, that community, it does, to your point, have a lot of their own sort of local flavor and things. And I'm sure that there's going to be, we're going to be working with them as a studio. And I do think that there will be, just like there was like in the Warner Brothers days, you had the local Germany office that would make content for the German market. You would have that in Japan, you had that in France. So there always is going to be, I think, in the international marketplace, a desire to have some locally flavored, programming that they'll do. But I also think that the stuff that we do here, is global and will translate.
You guys came out of the gate with an Aronofsky movie and a U2 residency. Did you come out of the gate hot? Like how did that first year evolve?
Nobody knew what to expect. I joined after the building was opened and after we were sort of, in the swing of things, and Postcard, the Aronofsky film, had been playing really, really well. I think that whether or not it was the movie itself or the spectacle of the sphere that made people want to go and experience it, who knows? But, I think it did extremely well. We right now have that kind of a la Disney. It's like in the vault now. You take something out of rotation, put it in the vault for a little while. Because right now we're playing Wizard of Oz, 3 times to 4 times a day and selling out. So, that the diversification of what we show there will evolve over time. But right now, for the filmed experiences, it's Wizard of Oz. And then at night, we have our live residencies on certain nights, obviously. And then we periodically do these marquee events, which are, like the UFC, event that we did last year, or the NHL live draft. And then we do keynotes for very high-end corporations. Like at CES, we just completed the Lenovo keynote, which, I think had 50 million people viewing that, on live streams, while we were also had, 15,000 people in the venue. So it's a full service kind of place. It's a venue, but it's not a venue because, it's not like somebody comes in there and you say, okay, here's the keys and the Wi-Fi password, right? So we are heavily participating in everything that happens on that media plane, on the outside of the building, the inside of the building, to create that one-of-a-kind experience, no matter what it is.
And I know MSG Group has so much great data on live entertainment. First of all, why U2 first? And how do you guys go about picking the bands that come in residency? Because it's a very eclectic group. It's everybody from U2 to the Eagles to Grateful Dead to Zac Brown to the Backstreet Boys. How is that? How are and I know you've done Anima and you've done big DJs too. So
the EDM stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Who's picking those things and how does that process work?
There's a woman who is based in MSG, but she's the head of booking. She's the head of talent. Her name's Jojo Vaccarella, and she's amazing. Okay, she's been here for decades. She's fantastic. She's extremely plugged in to the music world, and she is the sort of first line of defense on the acts and the things. Because she also books for Madison Square Garden. She books for the Beacon. She Radio City Music Hall. She's in charge of live.
Right.
And so JoJo has, like, we talk a lot about it, right? So there's a series of criteria that, lend itself to bands for Sphere. And, ultimately, Jim Dolan is the final arbiter of anything. He's our chairman and CEO, and he's very, very active in those kinds of decisions. But when JoJo talks about, and when we talk about, like, okay, what's next? It's an 18,000 seat arena. Not everybody is going to be able to sell out an 18,000 seat arena on a sort of residency basis. It's a self-selecting group that can actually achieve that goal. And then you have to really feel like they understand and want to embrace the medium that is Sphere. Back to if they can do that same exact show at Madison Square Garden, not for Sphere.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very different experience. And so if they're really embracing that idea of doing this fully immersive show, that helps sort of, accelerate the decisions about who's going to go in there. I mean, I remember it was very sweet actually when the Eagles were playing and Vince Gill was up on stage and he made a really funny comment of like, I've never been ignored by more people while I'm performing in my life, So it takes I think it takes a really self-aware, confident musician and artist to understand what they're getting into with that. So it's not for everybody.
Right.
Not everybody wants to play it.
And speaking of being comfortable with the process and the experience, you have special cameras and a whole teams of people that understand, because there's also the technologies where you take a screen and you extend it, Screen X and things like that.
Yeah.
You guys aren't doing that. You're building this thing to be completely organic in the space.
That's right.
And so having seen U2 a number of times, I know they're very comfortable with their giant LED screens and they're very comfortable in that medium, as is John Mayer, who worked with the Grateful Dead, and they're kind of known for their graphics and things. And so they have to be able to work within that system of that special camera you're using. Can you just walk me through for a second what that camera is and how that works?
Yeah. So we have a proprietary camera system called Big Sky. And the Big Sky platform was, created and invented by us out of necessity. The screen itself in the media plane is 18K resolution. And there isn't a camera in the world that can capture that resolution. So we invented one. And the purpose of all of that goes back to the entire principle of Sphere in the first place, which is really full immersion. So you have to have that resolution to really recreate that feeling of being in it. And so when you're talking about live capture, there's a lot of cameras that have, much better resolution nowadays than they used to and whatnot. And there's, a lot of great cameras that you can use for certain element shooting. But if you're doing a full media plane takeover with live capture, there wasn't anything on the market. So Big Sky got invented, and it got invented during the period of time in which Darren Aronofsky was, doing Postcard. It was filmed on Big Sky. And that camera essentially creates sort of a window as opposed to just, sort of looking at something kind of just visually and saying, oh yeah, that's high fidelity. This is intended to really create a window where you feel like you're in it. It's like, think of like VR without the glasses.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can create that with Big Sky, you are basically creating an environment when people are in there with live capture where you are taking and transporting an audience into that space. You're almost looking to trick people into feeling that that's where they in fact are when they're not. Digitally, it's a similar kind of thing. A lot of, like you talked about Dead & Co., right? They are, there's tremendous graphics that, in digital environments that they create with a lot of really high-end, technologies and digital artists. And that, again, is at an incredibly high resolution. It doesn't go to the 16K that the live capture does for that screen, but it's at native 12K. And again, the idea is such unbelievably crisp sort of resolution that you feel you are in whatever that environment is. And that is a very heavy lift. It's not cheap. It's not as expensive as some people think it is, but it's not cheap. And it is all about really being, honoring the medium itself and making sure people are not just watching something, but experiencing it.
And given that it's 18K and such crisp resolution, I can't think of a better movie than to start with, which is one that was made in 1939. So why? I mean, and congratulations on getting to over $230 million of gross and $2 million in sales.
It's crazy, right?
Amazing.
Awesome.
But all the things you just said about the technology and Darren Aronofsky, who is incredibly versed in different technologies and embracing those things. And I could see handing him that camera, and if you want something that's completely crisp, why a 1939 very beloved movie, but it's not something that you can't see on television every 10 minutes. Walk me through why that movie.
Wizard of Oz was actually a technological marvel in its time too, in the late 30s.
Mm-hmm.
It was, one of the first, I think, two movies that utilized Technicolor. It itself was, groundbreaking. And so when you think about taking something, that's a classic and beloved film and bringing it to audiences today in a way that is never been done before, using technology that had never been invented before, and really gifting people the opportunity to experience this classic in a way that they otherwise couldn't. We all have watched The Wizard of Oz growing up, but all of us have watched it on a, tiny little television screen. And the challenges that were associated with it were great. But the idea of being able to do that, and really create that same feeling of wonder and awe and nostalgia that you could do for audiences today, young and old alike, inside that immersive and experiential environment. I think that it was just it was a challenge, but it was a labor of love, and Jim loves that movie and felt like he could create something truly, truly special. There was a bunch of times we thought we weren't going to get there, but we did. And the beauty of, the sphere too, is we get to still work on it. Like we just did an update to it, 2 weeks ago. Like you get to, as the technology continues to improve, you get to still work on things and sort of refine them, which is not something in our world that we, my old world, your current world, you ever got to do, right? Your movie was out in the theaters. That was it. Maybe you updated something on the DVD if there was a mistake. But otherwise, it was like, there you go, it's out there. And with this one, we get to still play with it too, which is great. But the response has been great.
So walk me through the process, because you have a movie that is a certain length, which has now been cut down to 70 minutes, and you have a screen, like you said, that most people just seen on their TV screens. The Sphere obviously is a giant wraparound immersive experience. You aren't just taking the screen and stretching it around. You're creating something different. Walk me through how those decisions were made and why 70 minutes, and how did you decide to use AI and different technologies to expand the experience to make it more immersive?
One of the things about this medium, which is fantastic, but when you're trying to, that immersion that you have in there, if you're telling a linear story, which is a little different than a concert, right? If you're telling a linear story like that, there's a cognitive load issue. You start to get
Right.
fatigue. You can't have that happening to you in such an intense way for too long. So there's actually a Stanford scientist that, and we have a lot of experts that we consult with and deal with, and people who are really, unbelievably talented about cognitive load and eye line. And we do know that certain camera movements and things that you do are going to cause people to feel physiologically upset, right? And so we look at those factors when we were talking about how we were going to be adapting the film. And then we worked with Jen Lame, an Academy Award-winning editor, to, help us sort of look at the film and say, okay, what are the moments that we're going to have to condense down here in order to take this 101-minute original film and get to a place that's going to feel a little bit better and is also not going to have those same sort of issues with camera movement and things that could cause people to not feel well in watching it. So we got down to, I think it's actually 76 minutes or 77 minutes. I have to double check that because we went back and forth a little bit on some things, but somewhere in that mid 70s range. So that's the runtime answer. In terms of how to take that rectilinear image, and expand that screen, in order to, to make it all make sense, there really isn't a way to do it. Yeah. There's traditional things that we've used in our, in our world forever with visual effects and scene extensions and things like that. And we did deploy some of those techniques. But really the only way to truly do it was going to be with AI. So we partnered with Google, DeepMind and Google Cloud, and we started working with them. There's a company called Magnopus, Ben Grossman, who's our producer on the movie along with Jane Rosenthal, who worked very, very closely with Google and all of us on this. And there was three main techniques that got invented and utilized in order to fill out that screen, right? So the first is called super resolution. And super resolution is where you're taking the footage from 1939 and you're deploying AI techniques in order to bring out a fidelity and a resolution in those frames that did not otherwise exist. And it uses all of this AI technology to do that. So all of a sudden you can start to see the pores in Dorothy's skin. There's things that, you were able to pull out of this to sort of get an unbelievable, crispness to the images. And then there's the outpainting. So if you've got the rectilinear image and you're only seeing, Dorothy from the waist up, now with this huge screen, you would see all of her.
Right.
So AI trains on the film and knows that Dorothy's wearing bobby socks and her legs look like this and her shoes look like that. And it learns and it can sort of outpaint the characters based on what it knows those characters look like in the rest of the film, or even a scene, a background, whatever. It will learn and it will sort of help with that outpainting. There's a lot of things that happens with it. It hallucinates at times. It took 2 years to do this for a reason, because you have to go through a lot of iterations before it figures it out. And then the third was what we called performance, which was not so much making the actors do things that they weren't doing otherwise, but if they walk out of frame in the original film, well, there's still a whole bunch of screen you got to fill.
Right.
So it matches that character to know that, like, okay, now it's going to keep walking until it gets to the edge of to the doorway.
Mm-hmm.
And so performance generation, outpainting, super resolution, those were 3 AI techniques that we had to try to master in order to fill out that whole huge immersive media plane on it. And the only way to do that really was with AI. And then there was a lot of traditional visual effects in there too.
Right. And you add to that, then you drop apples on people, you have monkeys fly over you, you have wind, you have fog, you have all this other stuff. So there's more of a, for lack of a better word, 4D experience, on top of that.
That's exactly
It's a completely different way to look at content, for lack of a better word, that's not to be taken literally as a restoration of Wizard of Oz, but a completely new experience in this new medium.
Look, there are, the Criterion Collection. There is a lot of fantastic work that it's done in the industry to, preserve and restore classic movies, right? And that is fantastic work. I fully support it. I love it. But that's not what this is. This was never intended to be some, sort of faithful restoration. That classic has been restored already in either, 4 or 8K. So that's happened. This is to create something that is wholly, different, but yet honors the integrity of the original film. I mean, the amount of research and work that went into this, which a lot of people don't know and realize, archival material, the amount of time we spent, researching things, and notebooks of cinematographers, and even the way we re-recorded the score, on the original soundstage that the original score was recorded on, using notes from the musicians at the time to make sure certain instruments and the way that they were used were recreated lovingly, painstakingly, to sort of do that in a way that honors every single thing about the movie. I mean, this was not some sort of sloppy, lazy, irreverent way to sort of look at this film. In fact, quite the opposite. The people who were involved in all of this, we became, experts in the filmmaking at that time, in what happened on those sets, and every little thing about it. I mean, there's one moment, and if you watch it in Sphere, this is one of the moments I always love the most, which is the scene in the forest where you first meet the Cowardly Lion. And, he's sort of blubbering and Dorothy's sort of yelling at him, and she's got Toto in her hand, and she had slapped him across the face, right? And he's all like, oh, blubber, blubber, blubber. And she's like, you're making quite a fuss, And he starts saying, is there blood? Am I bleeding? And she says, oh, of course not. Like, you're making and you see her almost laugh. She almost breaks character and laughs. You never see that in the original movie that you're watching on the little screen. You can't tell. But the
Right.
history behind that we found out was they were cracking up so hard on the set that day. They had done multiple takes.
Right.
She could never get the scene. That's how much research that got done into the creation and the making of that movie so that we could see everything that we're meant to see. And that's why I look at that scene now and I see her lips quiver. I see her start to laugh. And I know that that was the last of several takes that happened before that where she totally broke character and cracked up.
Wow. Wow. That's cool. And then I was very curious about, well, if you got all these residences in there and then you're showing Wizard of Oz 3 times a day and when do you have time to look at other things? How do bands come in and figure out what their graphics are going to be? Because it's not like a theater where you're going down for enough time for people to rehearse. And then you showed me this incredible facility you have in Burbank. Give me just a little primer on what that is and kind of why that was created and what is that for?
So it's our testing facility, and it's next to our offices here in Burbank and right next to the Burbank airport, essentially. So those of you who were in Burbank, you will have seen this before, and it's this big gray battleship-looking dome, and we call it Big Dome. And inside a Big Dome is a quarter-scale replica of the media plane from Vegas, and that is where we do all of the testing of the content and the QC of the content and, making notes and changes and, because you can't see on a workstation on a traditional computer screen. Even when we were doing the Wizard of Oz and all the visual effects work, our vendors used to have to come over to Big Dome for reviews every day. We had a standing 5 o'clock review that would go like 5 to 8 or more because they couldn't see on their own workstations the level of resolution and fidelity to know whether or not there was an error somewhere. So Big Dome becomes that place where we can do that because you can't send everybody to Vegas to do it. That's not practical. And to the point you just made, there's no time. There's a band going in there or we're showing something or, so you can't just use the media plane as your testing facility in Vegas. You have to have somewhere else where you can do that. And that's what Big Dome here in Burbank affords us. So we're able to kind of keep humming all the time.
And test new technology as AI improves
That's right.
and et cetera, et cetera. And then I would assume that given this new platform, a lot of filmmakers are probably reaching out to you. And you seem to have like 4 or 5 hours left in the day. What does the future hold for Sphere?
Yeah, look, Wizard of Oz doesn't play as well at 10 o'clock at night, as it plays at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, right? So, you guys know, like I've got my horror roots. I love that genre. I would love to see us figure out, the best sort of horror experience we could have there for late nights and really take advantage of, the Vegas lifestyle and nightlife and have that as counter programming incrementally. It's no secret. I tell everybody all the time I want to do it. Jim laughs at me, but I'm going to figure it out, at some point. So there's things like that too, right? There's ways to counter program on those shoulder, moments of things that can really create incremental value. And the goal would be you go to Vegas on a weekend, you're going to go there 3 times, you're going to go and see, Wizard of Oz or another experience that we might have in there. And, oh, by the way, you're also going to go to a live concert that night, So there's a lot of options for a lot of different people. The next thing we've got that we're in production on now is, From the Edge, which is an extreme sports experience that we've got 5 different extreme sport athletes that, and Chai Vericelli and Jimmy Chin are directors on that. And, that's a totally different audience, totally different thing that we would program in there too. So goal is you go to Vegas, you're hitting up Sphere.
Right. Right. And I would imagine that there is a tug to bring in DJs, but at the end of the day, all the casinos are doing that. They have these huge nightclubs. It's like, besides, like, there's not that much difference. So you're trying to counter program and be specific to Sphere and have it to be its own brand rather than just trying to fill time in the night.
Yeah. Look, Anima, Elenium, they've come and it's been, like that EDM, DJ vibe that you can get. It's fantastic. And again, that's going to be a different show Millennium's going to do a different show at Sphere than they would somewhere else.
Yeah.
But, and again, that's a little bit of a later night crowd too. That's great. We love it all. We love it all. The diversification of it all works.
Mm-hmm. So I thank you so much for your time and sharing all this with me. I always ask a version of this question to my guests at the end, but since you're a person that's been at such a high level in all these decisions, I usually say best memory on set, but I will ask you, what's your best memory of making a movie?
Wow. We always used to say this, Richard Brenner and I in particular, because that's, he's somebody that I was, we were in the trenches together for so long. I mean, Toby too, right? But Richard and I always used to say that the best emotion that any studio executive ever feels, on, a Saturday morning after a movie's launched on a Friday night isn't joy, isn't elation, it's relief. Because you don't even let yourself feel joy. You just feel like, oh my God, thank God, right? And so I think that if I, looking at it that way, I'd have to say that, things that things that we took big swings on or we were worried about, and worked are the ones. And so it's all, it's these, horror franchises that we launched that became franchises that you didn't know were going to be franchises.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was Conjuring, and then the way, we had an inkling because the trailer took off, but man, that was such a good feeling when that film just took off like a rocket.
Is your favorite moment Monday morning or is your favorite moment Friday night? When is your favorite moment in that process of getting those grosses?
I think Friday night.
Mm-hmm.
I think Friday night because do you know what I mean? Because
right.
Then it just becomes a game about how good it's going to be Monday morning, or even Saturday morning.
Yeah, that has that upward trajectory. It's always like, this thing could do this. This could do this. This is, I know. I love that as
and
well.
And my version of it for Sphere was at the premiere. We're all in venue. This was so palpable and this is so communal. So you'll love this, right? We've been watching this for 2 years. We've been doing all this like it's just been, a labor of love. You're exhausted. Nobody slept for weeks. And we're in venue and the tornado happens, right? And when the house lands, boom, at the end of the tornado, and the entire audience broke into applause.
Oh, wow.
And I cried. Jane Rosenthal and I were holding each other's hands, and we both burst into tears.
Now you know how it feels for me to be at a preview when you get that's how we feel during a preview. So given that, I just want to ask you one more question. What did you dress as at the premiere of Wizard of Oz?
The Tin Man.
Nice.
The Tin Man.
I love the commitment.
Jim told us, this is one of the things. This is I'll leave you with this story. So Jim said, about 3 weeks before we opened, Jim said, okay, so you're all dressing up as characters for the premiere. And we were like, haha. And he was like, no, you're all dressing up as characters for the premiere. And then we thought, oh, he means evocative. It'll be evocative of a character, And then he kind of sort of semi-assigned us characters. So I'm not sure what it means that I was the Tin Man. But okay. And then we were like, okay, so I got silver pants. I was like, okay, I'm going to be the Tin Man, silver pants. And then about 2 weeks before, he found out that we were evocative and not going all in authentic and was like, no, I'm sorry. Did you misunderstand me? And then we all had to go full on cosplay.
Amazing.
And we just embraced it. We all just embraced it. And it was a ton of fun.
So the footnote to the last story is that you were crying holding Jane Rosenthal's hand dressed as the Tin Man. That's the best. That's right. I love it.
She was Glinda. The
She
good
got
witch.
to be Glinda.
She had a wand.
Oh, perfect. There you go. Perfect.
She had a wand and a hat.
Oh, perfect. Oh, my gosh.
I was the Tin Man. And we were crying.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Todd. It's always good to see you.
Thanks for tuning in for this episode of The Producer's Guide. If you're a fan of this podcast, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends and family. And if you got any questions about producing, send me a DM on X at Todd_Garner. I want to thank my producer, Steve Delamater. And until next week, I'm Todd Garner. See you then.